Greetings, fellow Earth monkeys. This broadcast is in no way part of a massive global conspiracy paving the way for future world domination by an alien race. If you're watching this, then you probably already know that this is the Dancing Geek podcast. You possibly don't know that my name is James in real life, but if you want to find me online, look for Dancing Geek and there's links below. So, my first work in progress to show you guys is the purple sweater vest that I am working on for my sister. And it turns out that picking up and knitting a little ribbed edge to something like this is not as obvious a task as it would seem. I read somewhere that when you're going vertically up stitching, you should pick up a stitch every other row. I think this is nonsense. Because if you look on this sleeve, this is the size of the sleeve originally. Up against my arm, it can almost stretch down to my elbow. And this sleeve, picking up following that weird direction, which I have to admit I can't remember where I got it from, comes down to about my wrist. So it shrunk quite a chunk. Hey, that rhymed. It shrunk quite a chunk. It shrunk quite a chunk. So yeah, I'm going to obviously have to rip that out and redo it, because when we test it on her and stuff, this was the right size for her, so I need the sleeve to be this size. So I might do a little bit of kind of looking at the gauge of the ribbing here and the gauge of the ribbing on the base, which has already been washed and kind of has gone a bit flat. And then actually guess a number of stitches and actually do some maths around making sure I pick up enough stitches this time. Because I thought, oh, I'll just pick up around and knit it, I'm sure it'll be fine. No, really not. And I don't want the neckline to be like, it needs to be like this. Can't do it. No good. And since I'm supposed to be making this fit her better, because she knit the first version of this, not worse, that would not work. So it is still a work in progress. I've had this since May 2014. So let's just say this is a long-term project. But it's moving forward slowly, and it is a bit more of a priority project now. I'm kind of going, yes, I'm going to get this off my plate. I will. By the end of the year? Yeah, I reckon. I reckon I can get this done by the end of the year. We'll see. Whip number 2 is my heliocentric hat with the ever so special amendments just for me. Thank you, Nathan. So if you haven't seen me talk about this before, it's a double knit hat by the amazing sockmatician who is Nathan Taylor, and you can find his patterns and him on Ravelry and his podcast on YouTube, Sockmatician. And when he talked about this, I noticed that, well, I should tell you it's based on the solar system and the planets in the solar system. So you can see a massive J here for Jupiter. And there's an M there for Mars, and there's another one here for Mercury. There's Earth, Saturn, Uranus, etc., etc. Snigger. So when I saw this and I saw the way it was laid out, now it goes over more than half the pattern, so I can't quite show you. But if I start here and then rotate it round, you can see it starts with a J, and then there's an M-E-S, and in the original pattern, this little letter here was missing. It was another star or something. And I wrote over to him or spoke to him on my podcast or something, I can't remember now, it was so long ago, and said, if you put a little A for asteroid belt in there, it would say James. So he was like, alright then, if you say you'll knit it and I can get you double knitting, I'll do that for you. So he did, and it's even got a little asteroid belt behind the A, so it's kind of cool. And it is appropriately between Mars and Jupiter as well, so it all fits in with the because they go Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, etc. down the hat. Pluto is still included, but only on the inside, just there. Very cool. For those of us who still remember Pluto as a planet, oh gosh, I wonder how old people who don't think Pluto is a planet are. Anyway, and you can see this is my little progress keeper. I have done a big chunk on this since I last saw you guys, which admittedly was a long time ago. My apologies. Turns out having a partner who is home during the summer holidays really impedes on my podcast recording time. Go out of the house! Do something! We're both homebods, and it makes not suddenly having the house to myself for 6 weeks a bit of an issue. But I have churned through this, and the reason for that is, one, I want to get it done because I had it on the needles for a little while, and two, I want to use my Yarnet yarn bowl, because I don't have any of the yarn bowls at the moment, and I'm using my Yarnet to pull from the inside and outside of this ball because it's double-stranded fingering, because it actually calls for, I think, DK. The other yarn I'm using is this gorgeous blue and white thing. This is Manos del Uruguay, and it is the Silk Blend DK. Amazing. This fantastic shiny shimmering ball of awesomeness is a podcast prize that I won from the amazing Aish. Oh man, I can't remember your podcast name, I'm sorry. But it's the yarn itself is from Lanitiumexmachina, who is this lovely lady. It is her glitter socks, 75 merino, 25 nylon, 5 stellina. This colourway is black pearl, you can kind of see why, and it makes an awesome starry night sky for the whole solar system theme. And there will be more on Lanitiumexmachina later. Whip number 3 is a multi-part project, and technically a couple of the bits I have finished, and it's technically a separate pattern in the Bergère de France catalogue. I do not recommend their patterns. They're beautiful, but they're darn hard work to follow. If you like old school patterns, where they kind of just say, cast off 2 and then cast on 7. And I was like, how the heck can you do that? Because if you cast off 2, you've got your stitches then split, and I had to just go and check with some more experienced knitting friends, and they were all like, yeah, you split the stitches back and then you do it, and then no. I'm like, right, okay, well, fair enough. But it's not obvious. And are you supposed to kind of knit the second stitch and then cast off, or do you slip the second stitch and then cast off and slip it back, or what? So, because I think I've got a bit of a gap, because I knit the second stitch, cast off, slip the stitch back, then of course I knit it again, so there's a bit of a discrepancy. I don't know, and that annoys me, you know. I would like it to kind of go, cast off 2 stitches without knitting the 3rd stitch, just slipping the 3rd stitch, slip that stitch back and then cast it, you know, just because not all of us have been knitting since we were 6, and not all of us learnt it at school. You know, this is 2015 now, not 1960, and so yeah, they're a little bit awkward. There was another one as well, where it kind of just said, do the left leg like the right leg, reverse all the shaping. And I think I was also supposed to include in that some ribbing, and not just the increases and decreases. But I really couldn't. Shaping. Does shaping include ribbing? I don't know. I don't really think of ribbing as shaping. But now I'm starting to construct the whole thing, I'm starting to think I should have. But whatever, it won't really make a massive difference. It just annoys me that, you know, if you're going to write a pattern and say that, at least make it obvious what you mean. But yeah, that's the 2013-14 catalogue. The actual items in it, however, pretty spiffing awesome. So, cutest but cutie. Baby booties! How awesome are these little fellows? Aren't they cool? I'm very, very happy with these. They are very awesome. And the construction, despite being really awkward to knit, is really kind of fun. Because they actually have like a little, the tongue. Yeah, the tongue of the shoe. And then the sides wrap around and then you have a little lace. So it's kind of like a proper little shoe. And that makes it really, really loose. That'd be really easy to get onto a foot. Really easy to sort of stretch it over, but then you do have a little lace to tie up, which I imagine is not so easy as just a slip-on bootie. So yeah, we'll see. But anyway, it's super, super cute. So that's just disgustingly cute. So that's fantastic. So I'm very happy with those. To go with that, I have the matching hat. Super stretchy. And I worked out on a VKN with FOM Dye recently that if I kind of hold it here-ish, it looks like I'm wearing it. Ah! But it's actually just that size. It's tiny, little tiny hat. So the baby that these are for has already been born, although it was induced a little early. Not much, a couple of weeks maybe. And I'm knitting a 3-month pattern, but they're already posting photos going, look, it's growing! And I'm like, oh my god, no, stop! I'm still putting this thing together. But this is the pièce de résistance, which is a little baby grow. So if I kind of fold it up, because I've not finished seaming it all together yet, then this is roughly what it's going to look like. Ta-da! So yeah, the baby doesn't have 4 legs. That's just that 2 legs haven't been sewn together yet. I've done the raglan sleeves together with a slit down the side because it's going to be poppers. And then I'm working on doing the little neckband, so it's all lovely and soft around baby's neck. And I duplicate stitched this from a chart on the internet because the dad loves dinosaurs. I showed them the book and was like, pick something you want as their baby shower gift, cunningly now also their baby born gift. And he was like, well, she picked the clothing and he said, but I want a dinosaur on it because it's a fox in the pan. And I was like, okay, I can do that. Download a dinosaur chart. And that way I could just choose one colour as opposed to doing crazy colour work, which was in there. It does suggest doing like intarsia in the pattern, although I don't think it calls it that. That's basically what I think it would be. But I went for duplicate stitch because I've only done anything that would resemble intarsia in the double knit hat, which I showed you guys earlier, and the stitching's not very even in that. I mean, it's something for me, I don't mind, but because this is a gift, I want it to look really, really nice. And I was like, with duplicate stitch, every hand is going to be embroidered, every stitch is going to be embroidered by hand. I can really make sure that it looks nice. And I'm really pleased with it, and it really does. And I think it was really cute as well. So I've got the neck to finish on that, and then I just have a whole ton of grafting, the sleeves, the sides, and then I've got some little poppers. And it's going to have poppers around the inside of the legs, and poppers down one side of the, down one sleeve kind of thing, so that it's really easy to get on and off baby. And I think that's really cool, again, that's a really cool idea, because obviously a struggling infant that really doesn't want to do anything you want it to do, I imagine trying to dress one of those is a challenge. So the yarns for the baby project are all Bergère de France yarns. I just picked everything out of the book. When I went to buy them online, the site that had the cheapest price didn't have all quite the right colours, so I substituted slightly darker shade of green and things like that. But it is the Chignon, which is the thicker yarn, and then the Idéal, which is the thinner, slightly thinner yarn, although they both knit at a sort of the same gauge. One is airier than the other. If you want the English pronunciation, that would be China Ilun and Ideal. Okay, project number 4 to show you guys is more of a nap than a whip, and it is this beautiful cake of purple lace yarn. This is going to be my first project using lace yarn, and it is a lace project. It is the Even Star shawl. Yes, I am diving in at the deep end. Technically I've done stuff that's sort of lace, you know, with I mean, I don't know if this has rest rows or what, I've not looked. But I've done some sort of eyelet scarves and stuff, and then technically that would be kind of lace knitting, but it's not quite the same as going for full-on lace effect. So the Even Star shawl, when finished, is about 5 foot across, so it's a pretty big project. There are various people who have set very impressive records with this. The sort of first mention earlier this year was Josh Ricks, who is Sword of a Knitter, who I have spoken about many times before, and he managed to do his in 8 days, and this is a 5 foot circular lace shawl, so I think that's pretty darn impressive. However, there is a lovely lady from the VKN who actually managed to do it in 7 days. Oh my god! So, congratulations to her. I can't remember her... I think she's got a podcast, I'm not sure, but I can't remember. And I don't want to just say details about somebody if I'm not sure if they are online or not, or you know what publicity they're willing to have. So I'm just going to sort of say a lady from the VKN. This is the FO and Die VKN. Sorry, I should specify. Yeah, so FO and Die have challenged me to complete this by the end of September. Now, admittedly, the challenge was raised like at the beginning of August, but I've got other stuff that I have to get done because the baby is already alive and kicking and needs clothes, and I'm still knitting it. And I've had that project of my sister's for 1.5 years, so I'm kind of like, right. And I know it can be done in a week, but somebody did tell me that Josh apparently actually kind of injured himself slightly knitting that intensely. So I may not try and do it in a week, but I don't have that many weeks left in which to complete it, so we'll see. But I'm going to do the little swatch first to practice the various sort of stitches that apparently it does that are a bit fancy, and that sort of people who've already started knitting this have talked about on the VKN. And when it is finished, I'm going to be wearing it to a very special FO and Die event next year, and then it is going to become a gift for my sister, because I won't wear it again after that particular event. Whereas she and Ellie from FO and I both love the colour purple, and so if my sis goes to fancy events and wants to look fancy with like a little shawl over a dress or something, which she doesn't do very often, it's not her day-to-day style, but she does occasionally do, and she scrubs up very well when she does. So I think it would be an awesome gift to give her, and it would be something that I've made, so then if people compliment it, she'll be like, yeah, my brother made this, bit of a talking point, kind of cool, right? And the yarn is Drops Lace, which is a wonderful mix of baby alpaca and mulberry silk. I think it's 70/30 alpaca silk, yes. And you get 800 meters for 100 grams. The Even Star shawl calls for 1500, so 2 skeins will, fingers crossed, do me fine. Assuming my yardage isn't crazily off or anything. This yarn is why I want to get my Yarnit or some other yarn pot holder thing free, because the lace yarn is so soft and so there's so much of it that I'm worried if I pull from the centre that it will just start to disintegrate, and then I'll end up with massive yarn bath and then pain, because this is 800 metres of very fine yarn. So I figured if I pull from the outside that won't happen. I mean, you can already see potentially how it started to kind of, the cake has started to come apart underneath. And I'm like, no, don't do that. So I'm trying to stop it from doing that by just teasing it out again. But you know, if I get yarn bath with this, it's not going to be easy fix. It's bad enough with something like DK fingering. Ugh, lace. So this is going to get cast on as soon as I've got enough of the other projects off the needles, and I feel like I can dedicate some time to this. Because as much as I'm not going to make myself do it in a week, it would be cool to see how long it actually takes me, and if I kind of just take my time and mix it with other projects, I won't get a real sense of that. The yarn for that also counts as stash enhancement, in the sense that it's something that I have bought since I last saw you. It's not really stash enhancement because it's going straight into a project. For genuine stash enhancement, I have the amazing and lovely Wellwoman, or Wellwoman123, depending on where you're looking, to thank for some pretty awesome stash enhancement. I couldn't think of a better way to phrase that sentence. So, first of all, she gave me a gorgeous skein of opal picture, originally made apparently for Berger de France in 2006 maybe, or is that just the little image it's based on? So it's all mixed up colours, it's sort of rainbowy, it's based off this modern art piece you can see on the label there. And it's 75-25 superwash wool polyamide, and yeah, I think that's going to be a really cool pair of socks probably. I think that's just going to be what it is, nice and straightforward. Another one that she got me, and this was, I think this one was the initial response when I posted that I had my disappointing rainbow on Instagram, and she was like, "Oh, I've got a rainbow you can have," and I was like, "Oh my god, thank you!" And then it actually took us a while to meet up, and by that time I'd got the not disappointing rainbow, but she was like, "Oh no, we'll still do it." So I got this gorgeous sort of cake of awesome rainbow. So it's obviously a gradient. I think it's 100 grams. It feels like 100 grams, and it goes through two colour changes really, or at least I can see 2 bands of red, 2 bands of blue and purple, 2 of green, 2 of yellow. Although it doesn't obviously start on red or purple. And it's apparently 100% lamb's wool. Very nice. It's not the softest to feel now, but it should soften with washing and knitting, and it's very fine. I'm not sure if it's actually perhaps more a lace weight or like a 2-ply rather than a sock yarn fingering weight, but I will so I'm having to have a think about what I want to do with this, but it is gorgeous. There's no label with it or anything as to who it's come from. I can't remember if Wellwoman told me anything else, so I'm going to just go with thank you, it's beautiful. Number 3 from Wellwoman is epic, in the very literal sense. It is this thing that's as big as my head. So, she had some merino lying around and she thought I might do something with it, and I'm like, yeah. So this is a skein of, I think, machine knitting yarn, or when it comes on a cone it has a different way of measuring gauge or something. She did start to tell me a bit about it, but the basic thing she said was you're just going to go online and look it up and you'll work out the equivalencies and stuff. So this is a 2/16, if there are any of you out there who actually know what that means at the moment. I don't yet. But it's quite fine. I would say heavy lace or light fingering kind of weight. I'm not sure weight-wise how much there is, but it's awesome. I think this will work amazingly well as part of maybe a sweater, or maybe a whole sweater given it's thin, and a really nice thin sweater. Interestingly enough, Wellwoman does actually have machine knitting equipment. So there is a chance that I will be taking either this cone or another cone and actually having a go at some machine knitting, which I am very excited about, because the idea of hand knitting myself a really nice lightweight jumper, oh, I tried, and oh, I mean, I could, and I do sort of want to, but oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and certainly not with like lace weight, featherweight cardigan or something like that. Oh, whereas machine knitting the fabric and then doing some hand finishing or whatever you need to do, sounds awesome. And I could knit myself a whole bunch of sweaters without really, you know, that are actually just practically I want them to wear. It's clothing that I want to have. So it's more practical in that sense, rather than the also therapeutic sitting and knitting and enjoying crafting something slowly by hand, which I still absolutely enjoy. But Wellwoman may have infected me with the desire to machine knit and persuaded me on the basis that I could get myself a thin jumper without too much hassle. So stay tuned for that potential. My next little bit of stash enhancement is another gift. Thank you so much. This one is from Mel Trans of Mel Trans Designs. And check out this beauty. Now, she did write a little note to tell me, because there's not a tag on it. She said it is Fiber Nymph Dye Works, which is very exciting because that'll be an American indie dye that I haven't got an example of. And I tend not to get American indie dyes just because the postage, as we all know, is just crazy across the pond. So I wait until they maybe have at least a 25% sale, and then I can kind of justify it because that's postage and packaging covered. And it is her bounce base fingering weight 400 yards, and was in fact a custom dye job for Mel. It is the colours of her it's a football team, American football team, and is it Boise? I don't quite know how it works. I'm sorry, Mel. I've forgotten quite how it works. But what I do remember is this is the team's colours, and it's also the stadium's colours, which is epic. So the stadium is like blue and orange, including the turf. So just amazeballs. And I absolutely love orange, as you guys all know. So she decided to send me this as a little thank you for helping her out with some stuff. And I've even got a little Mel Trans Design badge, woohoo! So that will be going with my badge collection. Thank you very much. As for what I will knit with this, I'm not entirely sure. It could be a pair of socks, but I'm kind of thinking it would make an awesome knitted monster, or something like that, a stuffy of some kind, bakery bear, something like that, because it's just such strong colours and primary colours. I kind of feel like something like that, and having it sat with me would be kind of cool. The other part of Mel's gift is not yarn based, but is very exciting, and that's because, as well as Mel Trans Designs, Melissa, or Mel, is now also the owner of Keep On With Life. Very exciting! And it says the lotion that doesn't slow you down, which I can't say lines like that without putting a cheesy voice on it. But it's this really, really cool product that she's created, and it is now available. The website that it on her card and stuff is keeponwithlife.bigcartel.com, and it is these no-touch solid lotion sticks. So the idea here is that rather than getting lotion and then rubbing it all over and then having lotion all over your hands, even if you just say having to rub it on your elbows, you have to get it on your hands. So the idea with these is a bit like a chapstick, but it's for your body. And you can rub it on and everything. Now, I have been very poor as a podcast host in terms of reviewing, because I haven't even had these out of their packet yet. But I have an almond scented one and an unscented one to try out. The unscented one is so that my partner can have a go, because he's usually very sensitive to smells and what have you. So I will be having a play with these, and I will come back to them in a future episode. So I'm thinking of this as the initial promo, and then you'll get another promo, Mel, or when I do a proper review as well. Yeah. So we're all right. Yeah, we're still good. We're good. But as a cool idea, I think this is very unique. I have not seen anything else like this. I don't know if any of you guys have. And as she was describing it to me, she was kind of talking about if you're trying to apply lotion, you get it on your hands, then knitting is a right PITA. Whereas if you can stick the lotion on your elbows or your wrist or your forehead or your bum or whatever, then you don't get your hands all lotiony, and even the back of your hands. which actually is interesting because I do have quite dry hands today, so it'd be interesting to see what that's like, and still be able to knit and stuff. And obviously it's quite spot on application, so you don't have to just squirt a load and then end up with greasy hands either. So I shall give those a play and see what they're like, but just as an idea, it's something worth checking out if you suffer from dry skin and you don't want to get your hands all greasy from lotion. End of promo. Bing! The next bit of stash enhancement is not just stash enhancement for me! Woo! But first, I have to show you the bag it came in. Check this out. Moomin stamps! And not just one or two, but a whole page of them! And in fact, there's a couple more on the back here if I cover the address up. Oh my gosh! Very exciting! Moomin stamps. There's a few repeats, you know, that's fine. You know, they could have tried to get one of every single kind, and maybe they did. Maybe they had to be repeats. But still, Moomin stamps from Finland! How cool is that? So, if you don't know what that means yet, I can tell you that it is because this yarn is from Lanitiumexmachina, which is the black pearl sparkle sock base that I showed you earlier with the double knit hat, which I'm holding double. So I have a package of yarns from Lanitiumexmachina with the desire to pass them on to yourselves. Now, I was expecting 2 skeins, one for me and one for you guys, and I got 4 skeins. Ah! So, there is one which I'm obviously keeping for myself, which is this just beauty. So this is the one that I'm keeping. It's 80/20 merino nylon high twist, so it's a sock yarn. The colourway name for this is Shire, as in the Shire from Lord of the Rings. 400 yards, excuse me, for 100 grams. And it is beautiful, and it is squishy soft, superwash merino nylon, and yes, very, very happy. Now, part of the reason that she sent these was because I was squeeing over her yarn in the other project, and partly because she wanted me to let you guys know that her website is now open to international shoppers. So on the label last time I read 2 different websites. I said there was Lanitiumexmachina.com and Lanitiumexmachina.etsy.com. So what I understand now is that Lanitiumexmachina.com is open to international people. So if you don't like Etsy, or you would like all of the monies to go to the yarn dyer rather than Etsy getting a cut, then even if you are not in Finland and the EU, you should now be able to go to Lanitiumexmachina.com. There you go, that's how it's spelled. And purchase her gorgeous, gorgeous yarn directly from her, which I think is an awesome thing to happen. Lanitiumexmachina, that's her ID on Ravelry as well, and her Gmail account, lanitiumexmachina@gmail.com. So as well as this beauty, I have in the stash 3 more beauties, which if they leave my hands, it will be tearing them from my soul, but it's going to happen because you guys deserve some of this amazingness as well. So we have, these 3 are all glitter sock. We have Warlock colourway. It's all glitter sock, which is, like I said earlier, 75 superwash merino, 25 nylon, 5% stellina. It is just beautiful. Check that out. It's gorgeous. So I would say this has a really lovely mix of greens, from quite a light brown green, almost into actually just brown. Then there's sort of pale yellowy greens, dark grassy greens, slightly bluey. It's still green, it's not going into turquoise or anything, maybe more teal, I suppose. Sort of a fair green, forest green, leaf green. Oh, so many just gorgeous, gorgeous shades of green and brown that oh, it's so beautiful. I could keep all of these quite happily. We also have Star Trek Into Darkness. Oh, it's a geek one! Oh! This one's called Warlock. It's sort of a geek one, to be fair, as well. Warlock is kind of a geeky thing. So Star Trek Into Darkness, which is one of the Star Trek films. It's deep blues. It is blue rather than black or grey. There is a little patch where I would say it's maybe a very dark blue or a very dark grey blue. But again, it's so many different shades. We've got sort of a really dark indigo. We've got this sort of it's always a dark blue, but it's obviously a much more faded version of it. So it's kind of this moonlight blue, and always with all of these, of course, the sparkle as well. I think this would make another beautiful background to a heliocentric hat with the kind of the night sky effect. The one I'm using is a solid, and I do think you need at least one solid for colour work or double knitting colour work, because otherwise it can get lost, which is what Nathan did say to me about my choice of yarn. But I think because I've got one solid and one variegated, it kind of just about works. There are times when the other yarn is a bit more difficult to see. But oh, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. I'm going to not look at it too much, otherwise I'm going to delete this part of the podcast and not tell you about it. And then thirdly we have Lothlorien, another Tolkien one. And just look at this. So this one is not just shades of one colour, but shades of a couple of different colours. We have in here, we have some purple, some sort of almost lilac blue, some really nice deep forest greens, grass greens, browns. There's a grey, there's a sort of a scarlet maroon colour. There's some mid blues. There's sort of where all those colours cross over, and I run out of colour names. Lilacs, violet, sort of orange, yellow, sort of flecks in the greens and reds, and oh, it's absolutely amazing. It's almost really a rainbow in terms of the amount of range of colour in it. I wouldn't call it a rainbow, because a rainbow for me is something a bit more specific. It is your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, or the 6 colour pride flag or something like that, where it's got strong distinct colours. This is more of a variegation with lots of patches of these different colours, but it's absolutely beautiful. And on the glitter base as well. And yes, sort of that magical elven forest. So you've got the forest colours, but then you've got those kind of sort of magical colours floating on top and weaving their way through the forest. It's absolutely awesome. I really do love all of these. It is. I mean, I didn't even have to think about the Shire one. I don't tend to go for glitter yarn, which is possibly why it's a very good idea she sent me glitter yarn as well as a plain one, because I was like, well, I'm keeping this one, and I'll give away the glitter yarns because I won't feel quite so torn. Otherwise, I think I possibly would be able to give away one skein. Otherwise, I should. No, I need them all. Yes, these 3 are going to be part of a giveaway. I haven't organised that in my head yet, but it will almost certainly involve going and visiting her own website, so not the Etsy shop, but Lanitiumexmachina.com, and it'll probably be something like in the thread talking about the yarn on there, the base on there, the different types of yarn, getting a conversation going about the Lanitium yarn, so that we are talking about it. We'll get a bit of a conversation going about the Lanitium yarns, which I think is only fair because we've got 3 whole skeins to give away. And I think I will drag this one out a bit. I think I will do probably 1 skein per podcast, per drawing kind of thing. So over the next 3 episodes, I will be talking about and giving away some gorgeous Lanitiumexmachina sock yarn. And seriously, if the quality of the video is not enough that you can see how amazing this is, and you think I am being hyperbolous, that might be a word, then go and check out the website and see for yourself the photos on there, because it really is absolutely gorgeous yarn. 3 final pieces of awesome stash enhancement are patterns. So I've just quickly written down the details, hence I'm looking down at my lap here. Number 1, in the order that I've written them down, is the awesome Ananzi, which is Mel Trans on Ravelry. Her Ravelry name is Ananzi. And she sent me a copy of her pattern called Cursed Cable Socks. Thank you so much, Mel. A while back now, because I said something about self-striping yarn, and she was like, hey, you could use this pattern to use your self-striping up, and I thought that was awesome, so thank you very much, Mel, again. My second pattern is the unzipped sock pattern by and from the awesome Sarahstevens. Thank you so much. Sarah is one of 2 people behind the Fibre by Design podcast and the O Loops yarn, which I've heard awesome things about, and have enjoyed sort of drooling at their Etsy shop. And it just seems to be because she's lovely. So thank you very much, Sarah, that was very kind of you. And then number 3 was a prize that I got from Moclell, who is Moira, up in PEI. Hiya, Moira! I won a giveaway on her podcast back in January. Now, we both ended up having podcast breaks of quite some time. And I wasn't watching podcasts back in January because I wasn't very well, and so it took us a while to kind of connect on that. So I got a message a few weeks ago kind of going, oh hi, I don't know if you saw, but you won a giveaway and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, no I didn't see, thank you so much for following up. That's very kind of her. Not just to do the giveaway, but then to also make sure that I got the prize, given that I didn't then watch the podcast, for health reasons. So, yeah, I have a copy of Westy Vesty, which I chose myself, to be fair. Although part of it is some of the trouble that I have when choosing patterns is finding a pattern that fits it has to be a giftable pattern on Ravelry of a certain value. And then it has to be something that I like and I would enjoy and I would knit and da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's a bit of a trick, but looking at the Westy Vesty, there was a photo in the photo shoot where I think one of the models was wearing it upside down compared to how Stephen West wears it, and most of them wear it. Most of them, it has a really high collar, which obviously is folded over and kind of like shawl collar style, what have you. But it stops kind of at the rib cage or something, which feels very kind of Ming the Merciless, kind of big billowing neck, and then it kind of crops. But somebody wore it upside down, at which point it kind of was an odd fit, but the length of it was much more sort of neckline and waistline, and I thought, well, it's an odd piece anyway, and it's a fairly simple construction, so it might be quite cool to make it, and then I could play with wearing it that way around instead, and kind of having it as a bit of a blanket with armholes kind of feel, or something like that. So it's a bit of an experiment on my side, and as with most of Stephen West patterns, it is a wander out of my comfort zone, which is not a bad thing to do. So thank you very much, Moira, for that, and Mel and Sarah for my sock patterns. And I have so much sock wool that they will definitely get used, if not immediately, since my queue of patterns and things to knit has me fully occupied. for the foreseeable future, including the flipping even star. But they will definitely get knitted at one point in the future. Next in the podcast then is the community section, and I'm going to start with the ever-present questions, because I am working my way through Topher's list of questions, and he's added one to the list since I started the first lot. And because I'm doing one per episode and I'm a bit slow or a bit sporadic with my episodes, both over winter and summer apparently. Well, I'm learning these things about myself because, you know, this is my first year of podcasting, so I have to go through the seasons and see what happens. So question number 4 I'm on to, and that is, what turns you off? And I'm going to stick with keeping this innuendo free. So I was thinking about this, and I'm going to go with bigots and people who are very certain of themselves. And there's often a lot of overlap in that arena. Because I think people can be bigoted in their views or their behaviour. Somebody can be racist or sexist or cis-sexist or transphobic or homophobic or ableist or anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, or, you know, and I kind of think I use the word bigot or bigoted to encompass all of that as a way of referring to all of those without having to list everything, in terms of somebody who's prejudiced, I suppose, who has opinions based not on reality but on things they've been told, and they are in a position of privilege, which means they've never really questioned that. And a bigoted person, or a person who says or acts in a way that is prejudiced, may do so completely by mistake. And you usually can tell that person, because if you challenge them in a friendly, compassionate manner, they will often immediately apologise, ask questions so they understand better, seek not to do it again, and that's the kind of the compassionate layer that runs alongside, so that when you make a mistake, you go, "Oh man, I'm sorry, I had no idea, I won't do that again." Really clever people then go, "And I'm going to go and do my own research about this." Well, it's not clever, it's educated, I suppose. Because obviously somebody who is part of a group that's oppressed in some way, it is not their obligation to educate you. So it then becomes, go and find out for yourself. There's lots of resources available, the internet is full of them. But it's somebody who's willing to learn. Whereas when you meet somebody who does something that's from a place of privilege, that's very prejudiced, potentially dismissive, potentially abusive, potentially aggressive, and if you call that person out on it and they just move straight into defending their own position, or ignoring what you say on it entirely, or just repeating themselves. I had somebody recently kind of ignore all the questions that I asked. So I posed some questions to them that were like logical extensions of their thought process, and they just ignored all of that, raised further points that just supported their own view, ignored any interaction I had with them about those points, and then just kind of was very condescending, and then twisted it to kind of say, "Oh, well, I was only going to talk about this in the first place," when actually they haven't talked about anything. They've broadcast, they've preached, but they didn't actually have a conversation about it. That is just ugh. And I'm in two minds about that kind of interaction, because sometimes I think, well, actually, the only way that these people would ever change, and they may never change, but the only way they would is if other people can stay open to them and stay connected with them and stay in a place of non-prejudice or openness or compassion, and to continue to relate to that person and display compassion to the people that they don't. Lead by example whilst staying connected to that person. So part of me sometimes thinks, well, actually, do I want to stay connected with this person and try and be part of the solution in that way? However, I certainly don't see it as an obligation on my part, and I would perhaps want to make sure that I'm very careful about who I do that for. Do I do it for somebody with whom I do actually get something back, but don't necessarily agree with everything that they say? Or do I do it for somebody where I have no investment with them, so I'm not going to worry about it going wrong or it causing problems or trying to have any more of a relationship with them other than a social one, whereby I am aware that I try and model good behaviour effectively around that person? Again, that feels very condescending. But if I think about it as modelling compassion around that person, then that's not condescending. That's about being a compassionate person around them, and hoping that some of that rubs off for the betterment of them and the people that they interact with. And I don't think it can be seen as condescending to want to encourage people to be more compassionate. I do have a bit of a tendency sometimes to go into teacher mode. Just generally, I always have. It's one of the things that used to annoy my sister no end, and still does, and can rub people the wrong way still. When I kind of go, oh, well, did you know this? Or I want to educate people, but I don't necessarily do it in a way that's sort of paying attention to whether they want to be educated or whether it's an appropriate time. I just kind of go, oh, this reminds me of this and this, and did you know this and this as well, and I was reading about this and it was really interesting. Basically, I become a total geeky nerd. So yeah, keep it about compassion, but it is definitely a turn off still to have that kind of an interaction, because it's a drain. It's a moment of and a lot of the time I will just choose to go elsewhere and spend time with other people. I can't save the world, and I do actually strongly believe in the power of networks. So there's a book a friend got me for a birthday a few years ago now, and I can't remember exactly the title of it. It's in the other room and I'm lazy. And it's all about how human beings influence each other through their networks. So not direct contact, but, and they've done some sort of social science around this, so they've come up with a number of sort of a factor of 3. So you influence your friends' friends, and your friends' friends' friends. So there's the sort of the what's it called when you're like supposed to be no more than 6 connections away from anyone else in the world, and it's like the 6 steps of Kevin Bacon or something, where you try and connect actors through movies and things like that. It's that kind of idea, and you wield influence up to 3 levels deep. So it's not just friends, because I know some of my friends. It is some friends of people who are friends with my friends, but none of them have ever met. So I can think of one of my friends, then I think of somebody they know that I've never met, and then somebody that person's knows that neither me nor my friend have met. And I have influence on that person by how I live my life, what I talk about, what I put out in the world, basically. I mean, hey, I do a podcast and all of a sudden that reach is huge! How cool is this? So I have an influence on you guys, and then you guys have an influence on the people that you interact with, and then they have an influence on the people that they interact with, and I am influencing all of those people. How crazy is that? And you're doing the same with all the people that you're connected to. And if you think about it, you know, if you say everybody has sort of 10 unique friends, say, and this is very, very spurious, but if each of those people knows 10 other people that I don't know, and each of those people knows 10 other people that none of me nor my immediate friends know, then my reach is to 1,000 people already. You know, that's how quickly it grows. And you kind of think, well, actually, we all know a lot more than 10 people. We all interact with a lot more than 10 people generally. Even if it's not in the flesh, even if it is via the internet, you are still putting yourself out there in some way, you're still interacting with people, and the number of people that you impact on, it's huge. Now, the periphery of that network, it's a limited impact. They put percentages to it, and it was something like maybe 6% impact. I mean, I don't really know what that's supposed to mean, but to give you sort of an idea, it does tailor off, and then obviously when you go another stage further out, it tails off to the point where it's sort of negligible as far as they were concerned. But you obviously have a huge impact on your friends. So what you like, what you believe, what you talk about, the ideas you espouse, that kind of thing. So even if you don't necessarily agree with something on your friends, you change their opinions on things. And then they carry that out with them to their friends, and that's kind of what's happening, is that you rub off on each other, and then that part of that person that rubs off on you becomes part of you, so that when you talk to somebody else, part of them then rubs off on that person as well, because it's become part of you. I hope this makes sense. It does in my head. I have this image of all these connections and what have you going off in my head, but now I'm trying to describe it through talking head on the screen here. And all that to talk about what turns me off. But yeah, so fascinating stuff. You know me. I had to go on for a ramble about something at some point, didn't I? And community is the section where I'm definitely going to do it. In more community-related stuff, a acknowledgement that I didn't podcast for quite a while. It really was because it was the summer holidays, and I hadn't really accounted for the fact that my other half was going to be home all day every day. We spent a lot of time together, which is both lovely and awful. I am very ready for him to go back to work, which he has done today. And then I will miss him terribly in sort of a week's time or something. And I'll be ready for him to have a holiday and to be back to his holiday self as opposed to his stressed worky self. But yeah, so I was busy because we were doing stuff together, and the house was busy, so there wasn't really a time when I could just sit and chat and record and muck about. It's a bit more awkward because he really doesn't feel comfortable if I'm recording and he's trying to do stuff. He doesn't want to be on camera, he doesn't want to be heard, he doesn't want to that kind of thing. And he's just a very private, introverted individual. He's not comfortable with that, and I obviously totally respect that. So I always try and record when he's not around, which means my recording day will change this year because he's got a different day off this year, so it'll be a different set of days I can record on. So yeah, I've been away for a bit, and I'm back. Hi guys. I also haven't been watching a lot of podcasts over the summer holidays. Again, busy doing stuff. Not sort of like crazy adventures or anything, just being. And not having as much time on my own, and therefore not doing as many solitary activities. So knitting, gaming, podcast watching, podcast recording, they're all solitary activities for me. And so when I'm not on my own, I tend to do non-solitary activities, sort of cooking a meal together and relaxing and hanging out, maybe going out for a bit, maybe not, ... And I've been going and seeing friends a lot. That's a bit more sort of my own life related, but why not just random off into a tangent? So I talked a bit before about some health stuff for me, and I mentioned not being very well at the beginning of the year, and I've talked about mental health stuff quite a lot, certainly in some of my earlier episodes where it was really therapeutic, and part of why I was podcasting was to be able to talk to people about it. And I haven't had to talk to you guys about it as much for a few reasons. One, I do group therapy, so I get part of that through that. Two, I'm in a much better place, much better place than I used to be. And so just the need to the cathartic need to talk about what I'm going through is a lot less because I'm in a good place. And I suppose what I've started to focus on now is things that support good ongoing mental health, and part of that is good physical health. So I talked a bit about cutting out sugar, and in fact going as far as really restricting carbs. I sort of cut carbs from my diet. I've started to allow that back in. I have had things like pizza, so I'm not gluten-free. But I eat a lot more vegetables than I used to, and I really try and plan my meals so that I'm not just eating flavoured carbohydrates, which I kind of would describe my food previously as being flavoured carbohydrates. So, a sauce on pasta or rice or what have you, and there'd be a little bit like, a little bit of chicken in the sweet and sour sauce or something, but not a lot. There wasn't a lot of cooking happening. My other half did try and cook often. Try often to cook, as opposed to try to cook often. He successfully cooked. He tried to do that often. He didn't always have the energy for it, and that's, totally fine. So I've got more interested in what I'm eating and how I feel about what I'm eating, and supporting myself through what I eat, and how I sleep and the exercise I do as well. So I've been talking about C25K, Couch to 5K on Instagram, and not Pinterest, the other one, Periscope. So I'm on Periscope, if you didn't know, DancingGeek, as always. And I've only done one thing after I finished a run. I thought, I'll go on Periscope and I'll talk about Couch to 5K whilst I'm sweaty. So all of these things, and it's a real breakthrough for me, because the idea of taking steps to look after myself and to support good mental health and support improving my mental health really... I really struggled with the idea of being able to do that. It felt like expending more energy when I was already running on complete empty. And I've really had to go through a lot of therapy and the impact of therapy in my wider life, so improving relationships as a result of what I've done in therapy, to get to a point where I feel like I'm being... that I have stuff coming in, that I get positive things from my life, so that I can then use that energy as a positive feedback loop to build on it, and that's where I'm at the moment. So I've put in place for myself a really clear structure, the kind of thing you'd have to do for like a 7-year-old. This is where I'm operating. But it's working really nicely for me because as somebody who grew up without structure, really, I'm not somebody who has it built into my head, these structures of how I go about and what you do day to day. You know, I talk about being kind of a bit wishy-washy and what have you, but I think sometimes people don't necessarily understand that that means, you know, that I don't wake up at a particular time, that I genuinely would wake up at any point between 8 and 2 in the afternoon, or I would go to bed at any point between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, and it would just be when I ate if I was hungry. It sounds almost idyllic because you're free, but as you grow up, you do start to realise that being completely free has its own drawbacks. There is no ideal utopia. Everything has pros and cons. And the lack of groundedness, the lack of stability, the lack of routine has its own drawbacks. The amount of energy that it takes, and the lack of stability can leave your thought processes destabilized. You know, the phrase that pops in my head was crazy making, and it is in a sort of a flippant way. The human condition is such that a stable routine of some sort, a stable structure on which to be spontaneous, really benefits our mental state. It gives us some grounding. It helps us to not have to think about everything all the time. I sort of think about the parallel with learning skills. You know, babies learning to walk, or more relatable, sort of learning to drive. It's that idea of when you first try to do something, you're just like, oh my god, complete uncoordinated mess. And then you suddenly start to get a grip for it, and you start to kind of manage to do one or two things properly, and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then you are competent, but you have to think about it. So you maybe pass your test, or you may be walking, but it's something you have to think about. I say driving's more relatable because I think not many of us can remember learning to walk. You can think about a baby going through it, but you can't take yourself through those steps and really understand it in that way. So you're competent, but you're a recently passed driver. So in this country we have L for learners, which would be the consciously incompetent, where you're still trying to work things out and you know that you can't do it. Consciously competent is the you can do it, but you have to think about it. Excuse me. And then you become unconsciously competent. To be honest, a lot of people, I think, after passing the test do become unconsciously incompetent, but that's a different matter. But you're supposed to become unconsciously competent, where you don't have to think about it, you can just do it. And this is the idea that when you repeat a behaviour often enough, we create shortcuts in our brain. It becomes part of our unconscious brain, which is the vast majority of our brain. And we don't have to think about it, and we don't have to be engaged in that. It just happens. And, you know, walking is like that for most of us, and driving is like that for most of us once you've learned to drive and got driving under your belt for a while. And sort of any skill that you've acquired and become proficient at, you don't have to think. So, you know, somebody who's been knitting for a little while, you stop having to think about go through the loop, wrap it round, pull it back through the loop. You just go, and knit, or, you know, you just let your hands do it, whatever your technique is. And it's that kind of idea for mental health. What's particularly tricky is if, say, you've learnt to knit incorrectly, or let's say you want to knit using European patterns, so it's less judgmental. It's not about being wrong, it's about wanting to do it differently. Because knitting in a is it Russian style or Eastern European style, where sometimes it's through what we would call through the back loop, or we would say that it results in twisted stitches. I say we, I mean English continental style knitting, which the vast majority of people that I've interacted with do that. Let's say that the Russians, let's call it Russian style, let's say Russian style knitting hurts your hands. So this bad way of doing something that you've learned is detrimental to your health. You see the parallel I'm drawing here? So you want to learn how to knit continental, but you're so used to knitting Russian that not only do you have to learn continental, you have to unlearn Russian. You have to learn not to slip back into doing Russian style knitting. And if you've gone from learning, say, English to continental and what have you, the tendency to just knit back into the other one, because it's so much easier to do your old style. And if it's a behaviour that you don't have to sit and do, like knitting, then it's so easy to slip back into old styles of doing something. And you do, so you have to unlearn as well as then learning, and that takes a lot of effort. So I've done a lot of unlearning in therapy, and I have plenty more to do, as do, very, very, very proficient, experienced therapists. Nobody ever becomes perfect. What you do is you become healthy, and then if you want to go on to become a therapist, you hopefully learn how to be competent enough and potent enough as well, which is an interesting idea in therapy, to allow somebody else to go through that process, and to use you as a teacher, and to deconstruct themselves, and you hold both of you. It's really interesting. I don't know if that will necessarily make sense to everybody, but that's maybe another topic for another conversation, or just another tangent. But yeah, so my health, I'm in a really good place, I'm looking after myself, and I can't quite remember how I got to this from what I was thinking about in community, but that doesn't matter. That's what's going on for me at the moment. A section that I've done in the last couple of podcasts is my mathematics section, and I've had some really, really positive feedback from people, so thank you so much. If anyone has felt negatively about it, they've either chosen to just not watch it, or to not tell me at least. So thank you for the 100% positive response that I've had to that, from people either going that they're not mathematically inclined, but my ramblings have somehow helped them to understand, which is really, really lovely to hear, and a wonderful feeling for me as well as for you. And also for those people who just gone, oh my god, yes, I love the maths, it's so geeky, yes, more, feed me, that's literally what they've done, yeah, and so I have been pootling around, kind of thinking about stuff, and I looked at some of the ideas I'd written down, and I did have somebody actually make a request. However, there's nothing that I kind of feel I can just sit and talk about that follows on from what I've been doing. I feel like I've kind of covered the how to think about infinity, and some of the really interesting ways that works, and sort of how that relates to the shape-filling curves, space-filling curves, which was all spawned by the beautiful piano #1 pattern that sockmatician Nathan has released, and he's now been showing his #2 pattern on his podcast. The piano being the name of one of the space-filling curves, and he sort of talked a bit about it, and I was like, oh no, come on, no, here's all the maths about it, and it's amazing, and it does work, and da-da-da. But I did think about a couple of little points, so I thought I'd just briefly talk about them, but it's not sort of in the same style as I've done some of the other stuff. So he talked about the aesthetics of a space-filling curve, in that you take a little shape and you repeat it, which is how you create this curve. But when you repeat it, every time you do that, you also have to draw a little line to connect those new shapes. And he was like, aesthetically, that bugged him. And to be honest, I know what he means, because when I was looking at them, when I saw his comment, and I dragged out sort of my memory and started going online, I noticed that as well. You start with a unit shape, and then you repeat that unit shape, but because that unit shape exists within a square, and you're repeating the whole square, the unit shapes don't touch, and then you have to connect them. If you look back at previous ones where I've shown drawings and stuff, you might be able, or if you go and have a look for yourself, you might be able to see what I mean. But it was an aesthetic issue, and so I drew a little, just a very quick little picture, which I'll just hold up to the camera. I'm not going to do anything major fancy today, so there we go, just so I can check that it's on camera. Okay, so you can see I've drawn a couple of those space-filling initial curves as dots within squares, within a square. So that big square and the line would be what you normally look at. When you talk about space-filling curves, they normally show you just that line in one big square, and the big square gets repeated. But each of those space-filling curves can usually be broken down and shown as, or drawn as, a line which connects the midpoints of smaller squares within that big square. So the one that Nathan's doing, which is the piano curve one, is a drawing that connects the midpoints of a grid of 3 by 3 squares. Another common one draws the midpoints of the 2 by 2 square. Those are two I showed you. There's some really crazy ones where rather than kind of going to adjacent squares all the time, which both of those do, they travel diagonally to squares, or even jump to squares that aren't diagonally adjacent. So they go all over the place, but it's still generally drawing a line that connects midpoints in these squares. And then once you've got a pattern that does that once, you can just keep repeating it, so long as you can connect the start and the end of the line somehow and fill up a bigger square with it. You just keep repeating that. That seems to be how it generally works. Now that's very general, but I wouldn't be surprised if actually you could generate a whole bunch of space-filling curves just by following that kind of pattern. You'd probably have to do some maths to prove it's space-filling, but who wants to do that? I just want to draw pretty pictures, right? So, my reason for making this point was if you actually reduce or refocus what you're doing as connecting midpoints of squares in a particular pattern, then when you repeat that initial 3 by 3 grid 9 times to make its own 3 by 3 grid of 3 by 3 grids, that's how it works, is you keep reproducing itself. It's very fractal in nature, if that means anything to you guys. Fractals is something that is interesting as well. I've heard of fractal spinning, but I don't think fractal spinning actually really has anything to do with fractals in the mathematical sense. I think it's just a borrowed term. But that might be something I could talk about. But anyway, if you think of it as a shape that joins the midpoint of each of those small squares, then when you redraw the line on the new grid that's expanded, those lines automatically get drawn because you're always joining the midpoints. So it's a different way of looking at it, and obviously, you know, it's a space-filling curve. It's one line, so they have to all be connected. So you have to join these shapes together, and it's not necessarily going to change whether or not it's like it sort of doesn't quite sit right aesthetically, because from a design point of view, where Nathan's come from it, he's seen this shape, and he sees it as a three-dimensional N, almost a letter N in a box, which is very different to a line in a box, because a line has no area, whereas this N has area. I'll talk about that in a second. But I thought that might give you a different way of looking at it, and looking at space-filling curves in general. So I've talked a bit about them. I'm not going to do a big sort of draw on the sheet and hold it up and what have you presentation today. It was just to talk about having that view of them, because I've shown them before. So the other thing I was going to mention was this issue of area, because Nathan talked about, and this all related to how space filling curves, how they didn't seem to make sense. And he talked about the fact that when he drew his N shape in a box, he could compare the area of the N shape to the area of the box. And even if you shrank that box and then repeated it several times, because the box you ended up with your 9 little letter N's in it now, was the same size box, you basically shrunk the N to 1/9 the size and then repeated it 9 times, or shrunk that whole box to 1/9 the size, the amount of shape, or the ratio of letter N to box or background would stay the same, which is quite right. When you shrink or grow something, the ratio won't change, and if you have more instances of something, the total ratios will be the same as the ratio in any one thing. That may be a bit confusing, but if you think about colouring in shapes, you can hopefully kind of picture that idea of colouring the letter N in and kind of going, well, this is, I think he did the calculations on his podcast. Or no, maybe he did it in a message to me, I can't remember. But he coloured it in and he kind of said, look, the N is 8 squares big and the background is then, I can't remember, 12 squares big or something like that. And if you shrink it and reproduce it, the ratio is always still going to be 8/20 to 12/20 in that square, no matter what you do there. And he's quite right. However, that's not what a space-filling curve is. Because a space-filling curve is a curve. And a curve is a type of line, and a line does not have any area. Yeah. For area, you need length and width, and a line doesn't have any width. It just doesn't. Obviously, when you draw a line, you could say, well, if I zoom in really close, I could measure it as like 1/10 of a millimetre or 1 nanometre thick. In the same way that my hair has a width. And it's like, well, yes, but that's not technically a line. Okay, it's just a very, very, very thin rectangle or whatever. A line in a mathematical sense doesn't have any width, and that's why it's quite so cool when you start to think about a space-filling curve, because you take something that has only length, no width, and yet it can fill a shape that has length and width. You take something that has only one dimension and you fold it up on itself so much that it ends up having 2 dimensions. Or rather, it ends up filling a space of 2 dimensions because it's still just a line. So rather than kind of going off and trying to confuse you all about trying to think in different levels of dimensions and how does that work, and partly the reason for not doing that is because I don't think I could explain it, because I don't really understand it myself. I've not studied it in enough depth to really have that much of a grasp of a grasp of that part of it. But the really relevant part is the fact that the space-filling curve, even the initial module, doesn't have any area. So you can't actually compare the area of line to box. The area of the box will always be the length times the width. Even if you draw a line in that box, the area of the box is still the length times the width, and the area of the line is still 0. So the interesting question might then be, how do you then get something that suddenly is space-filling and suddenly has an area? Which I kind of just touched on by kind of saying, well, it doesn't really, because it's still just a line. And this is where, I suppose this is why it's a fascinating mathematical construct. This is why it's interesting to study. Because then you have to ask the question, well, does it have a width? Yeah? And what does it mean to have a width? What it does is to touch every single point that exists within a two-dimensional area. So maybe it then has an area itself. Maybe you could say it covers an area and it has a width and a height. But I think my tendency, my inclination would be to say that as a mathematician, you would still say it doesn't have any area. Which is why it would be called a space-filling curve. The name is very intentional, because it's not a curve with an area. The fact that it's called space filling is important because it's saying it's still a line, but it manages to touch every point within a space. And that only happens when you go to infinity, and all the stuff I've talked about infinity and how you have to think about it and how it boggles your mind because you have to switch from something that makes sense in tangible life to just working in ideas in your head. And I've tried to give you examples that illustrate how you can understand that more easily, how you can grasp that concept more easily. So again, you kind of go from a line which doesn't touch all the points in an area and it's just a very, very, very squiggly line in a box, to a line of infinite length, of infinite complexity, that touches every point within a square. Or, whatever, but a square is just easier to play with. And you have to go to infinity for that to work, so you already kind of start to take it out of the realm of things that are easy to get your head around. And so the fact that it touches every point in a square does not necessarily make it a square. And I would argue that because you've gone to infinity and you're starting to deal with things that don't necessarily just make intuitive sense, that somebody who kind of argued, but surely a square is just all of those points put together, and I would kind of be arguing, well, actually no, the way that you mathematically define it makes a difference, and so on. And really, you can get quite philosophical about when is a square not a square, when is a square a square. And from a mathematical point of view, defining these things and coming up with these ideas, and whether it be a square or something as complicated as a space-filling curve that fills that square, the only point of doing that is to then be able to do something with it. I mean, it's interesting in and of itself. It is worthy of contemplation just for the sheer pleasure of it. But if it's going to have meaning beyond just being pleasurable, then it needs to be something you can pass on to somebody else, and that it does something. It's interesting there. Is something meaningful if it doesn't have value to other people, or is it? I think meaning and value are kind of interrelated, and for it to have meaning to somebody else, it would have to have value to somebody else. Or not entirely sure how I stand on that, but that's my rough, off the top of my head thoughts as I sit here and just record spontaneously. And there would be something about why you would make a difference in maths would be to do with what you're going to do with it. So, defining a square is super, super straightforward, really. Or at least, as far as maths goes, it tends to be something that you would consider pretty non-trivial in geometry. It's a shape that has 4 sides, 4 internal rectangles, and the lengths of the side are all the same. Boom, done. That's going to be a square. And then what you do with a square, well, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to be able to change its shape? Do you want to take it from 2 dimensions to 3? And, if you just think about a square, well, why would you want to do anything to it at all? but maths is a tool for taking one idea and being able to transform it into something else. To me, I really see maths as about maths does two big things in my head. One is modelling, and the other is transformation. This is very... I'm sure people could argue that I'm missing stuff out, but I think if you take it very broadly, you could look at maths in those two terms. The modelling is the part where you look at something in the real world and you come up with a way to express it which is slightly more abstract than the real world. So we talk about, say, the orbit of the Earth, the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. And then, you know, we make a mathematical model of the solar system and all the planets going around it, and we use that to make predictions about where planets are going to be and what have you. But to do that, that modelling process, where we take measurements of the real world, and then we have to create a mathematical model. When we do that, we abstract it slightly, we take liberties. We make assumptions. We kind of go, well, the Earth kind of makes a pretty elliptical orbit. I mean, if you call it an elliptical orbit, it's going to be really, 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 really close to the truth. So for a given level of accuracy that I want to work to, it's good enough. It's a good enough model. And so we can drop all the really twiddly bits where it turns out that actually the tides of the Earth mean that we wobble slightly, or the impact of the moon around the Earth makes the Earth go around the Sun, and it's more like of this spirally kind of shape, or whatever. We just kind of treat it like an ellipse. And then we go, okay, well, an elliptical orbit works like this. So we would expect the Earth to travel in this general shape, and it should be here in relation to the rest of the planets and so on. And then we take more observations and we confirm it. So that process is we make a model. Then we do maths where we do transformations on that model. So in this case we move it forward in time because we're thinking about something that's a real world object moving around in time. So we calculate, okay, I want to take this series of ellipses and I want to move a point along them. And so you do that transformation and then you model again but in the reverse direction, and you go from the abstract model to the real world, so you make predictions about the real world, about what's going to happen. And this is kind of science in general, when you're making a hypothesis and what have you, and when you're doing your tests and your data and what have you. But the maths part of it is about make an abstract model of something, transform it, turn it back into something applicable to real world. So pure mathematics, which people might have heard of, usually is playing in the abstract world. And you can, there is an infinite infinities of things to play with in there. Hello, Rory! And you know, people spend their lives just playing in that area. And other people really devote themselves to working on the modelling side, and other people, you know, you start, basically you kind of almost, I almost see it as like this transition on a scale from kind of mathematician working purely in the abstract through to an applied mathematician, through into a very blurred line between that and a theoretical physicist, and then through into a more applied physicist, and so on and so forth. And again with sort of chemistry and all the sciences, when a scientist gets more into the modelling of how their system works, you know, there's mathematical biology, which I find absolutely fascinating, which is all about how things grow and how things like stripes and spots develop on tigers and lions and bears, oh my! And all that kind of thing. And it is, the mathematical part of that is you go, okay, well here's this biological phenomenon that you've noticed, and you've noticed various biological ways in which it gets inherited or what have you, but you want to understand what's happening on a cellular level to make that happen. Why is it happening? And you could just try and study chemical levels and what have you, but you could also look at mathematical modelling as a tool to look at it, and people do. So the mathematicians make a model, they go, okay, this is what it ends up looking like, and they study various patterns that they've already looked at. So they create a model and then they look at all these different transformations that are relevant. So it might be things like they've looked at the way ripples travel in water. So diffusion equations. So if you you pop a drop of paint in the water and then the way that it travels out into the rest of the water and its density and the speed at which it does that and all these kind of things, they're all modelled in different situations. And then we test these models in the real world, we get good ideas of how things work, and then we go, oh, well, we could try, does it work like this and does it work like that? And mathematicians do that, but maybe in a really abstract way, which means we don't go, oh, I wonder if this chemical diffusing here is like this sound diffusing over here. We're not that literal. A mathematician will take a chemical diffusing and then create a mathematical model where it's purely expressed in functions and all of this, and then they'll just start playing with it, start tweaking it around, kind of going, well, I can do this to any function. I've got all these tools that I can do to any function. I can take this take this diffusion problem and turn it into a geometrical problem. So it could suddenly be expressed as a three-dimensional shape, or I'll express it as matrices, and it suddenly becomes something, and it bears no sort of tangible relationship to the original problem. But what that means is you do lots of transformations to it, but when you're transforming it, you never break the relationships that are contained within it. So although you're looking at it from different perspectives and you're stretching it and tweaking it and mushing it around, all the rules contained in the original model, which is slightly abstracted, and that slight abstractness allows you to you have slightly fewer rules. So for example, we ignore the moon, so all the rules of the moon's interaction we ignore. Then we can smoosh it all around without having to worry about the real world and all those problems of having to deal with reality. And then we end up with these really interesting insights and ideas, and we explore it some more. And then at some point, when we've made some kind of discovery, or we've had some kind of insight into how this system works, we kind of understand it a bit better, then we bring all of that insight back, using all of our transformation rules, back to the original sort of framing of the model. And now we have the model, and we have all of this insight that we've worked out by playing with that model in a mathematical way. And we'll go, well, given these rules of interaction that this system contains in our model, we would be able to predict that, ... And we would also expect to see bodies that leave the solar system, but come back again. So comets. And mathematics will then predict these extra things, or we'd expect to see things orbiting these objects within the solar system. So, you predict moons and what have you, and when you take very accurate measurements of planets, that mathematical modelling is how we predict sometimes how many moons we'd expect to find, and then we get the good images and we go, yes, look, there they are. Or we go, no, why? Well, our model was slightly wrong, why was it wrong? Ooh. And then you go back and refine models, and that's where the scientists and the mathematicians have this fluidity. The scientists feedback, and maybe the scientists correct the models or make more accurate models, and the mathematicians go off and play in La La Land. But so, you might have heard about things like the Higgs boson a while back, and that was originally predicted through mathematics by a physicist probably, but it was the maths that physicist did that predicted it. And the mathematical tools they used would have been developed potentially by mathematicians, by pure mathematicians. And then, so people have gone, well, the only way that our understanding of the whole universe will make any sense is if this particle also exists. But we can't find it, and we can't work out a way to detect it. So then the scientists rack their brains going, how can we check that this actually is what's going on, that this model is accurate and that we don't need to sort of try and tweak it or change it again. And they think they've managed that. They think they've actually managed to do that, which is really, really cool. But sometimes it's cool because they prove that it's not real and it's not true, and then we have to go back to the drawing board and go, well, is this because the whole premise was completely false? Oh no, maybe it's just it's not accurate enough. Where, you know, the scientists go, but the Earth's actually got this bit of wobble going on, and they go, oh, okay, right, well, let's start to include other things like the moon, and it's like, well, that explains it. So if we include the moon in our model, that explains this wobble the scientists are seeing, and so on and so on and so on. And oh my god, can I talk for hours about this kind of thing? I do find it fascinating. And as I said earlier, I love kind of teaching. And you're like the perfect audience because I can just assume you don't know the things that I'm talking about, and I assume you do know the things that I'm referencing, and that's brilliant. Because you can't tell me, James, shut up. And you can't tell me, I still don't understand what the heck you're talking about. And you can just skip it if you need to. And it's all optional anyway, so it's just James geeking out. I say just. Don't think that's me being dismissive. I think me geeking out is awesome. Let's just say that for the record. Yeah, so I think that's going to be it for today. I've been a bit jumpy, and I've just been like huddled up. But I wanted to grab my first opportunity to sit and record, and I thought, right, grab the camera, record. Let's get another episode up ASAP. And so now you have it. As always, guys, lots and lots of love to you all who watch, even if you don't get in touch. It is really nice to know that people are still watching and enjoying the podcast, even if it's just through viewer figures. It's really lovely when you guys come and join in on the forum. Feel free to come post questions in the question thread, and I'll answer those alongside the ones I'm doing one per episode. The forum is not super active because I'm not super active in forums, so I don't kind of curate the place in that way. But there are people there. There are often kind of threads pootling along and ticking along, so do pop in and say hi, check in on us from time to time. And as always, thanks for watching. Big love. Bye!